a fireside chat with Dr. Aneel Chima, the director of the Stanford Flourishing program and the director of Health and Human Performance at Stanford University. And I've had the chance to get to know Aneel well in the past year, and what a delight! I mean, what amazing conversations about the essence of health and well-being, about the philosophy behind it, about what really constitutes human flourishing beyond just health, but flourishing. You know, when individuals actually are better. And Aneel is just an incredible educator, an inspired convener, community maker, and a connector, just an amazing guy. So I'd be delighted to have you here.
Ron, wonderful to be here. And thanks for the introduction. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think it'll be a nice complement to some of the wonderful conversations I've been hearing so far. And I'm impressed by what you've put together in such a short time, and by all the wonderful people that are here participating, both in the larger community as well as the speakers. So thanks for the service of putting this together.
Absolutely, thank you. It's labor of love, and thank you for your help in doing so. We were fortunate to be supported by the Stanford Flourishing program, which you should check out because it's an inspiring one. And I'd love to go into this conversation that was the beginning of all of this about human flourishing, particularly in the time of COVID. And I loved one of the interactions that we had of what it really does to our brain, right? I think that's such a profound thing that happened out of nowhere to all of us, and really shook our lives in ways that we could not even imagine, and changed them in such profound ways. And it's not just that everybody's talking about the practical things that change. You know, we're locked down, we're not traveling that much, we're not flying, we're not going to work. All of these things are very important, but they're day-to-day things. But what does it do to who we are, right?
Well, it's a big question, right? I want to sketch the space. We're talking about this in the context, not just any context, but in the context of sort of virtual and telehealth and the emerging trends within that space. I also might say within the space of transformative technology, where we have sensor tech, algorithmic tech, and intervention tech intertwining in new and novel ways, communication technologies, convening technologies like the platform Hop-In that we're on right now. And so we're talking about health and well-being and flourishing of individuals, of people relationally, and of communities in that context, right? And I think it's always useful to define terms just a bit. So when I use the term well-being, there are many models that could be used. I think one that's sort of good enough is to say, well, let's call well-being emotional aspects, the ability to generate and experience positive affect like happiness, joy, satisfaction. Psychological aspects, which is the sense of like my life matters, I have purpose, self-acceptance, and so on. Social aspects, I have good relational connection. Also community aspects, I belong to this, right? So that's all under social. And then I would say contemplative, which I think is particularly relevant in this time where this is focused attention, wide awareness, and the ability to reflect deeply. And then I would say, of course, the physical wellness, which is the big three: how I rest my body, sleep; how I fuel my body, nutrition, right? And how I move my body, exercise. So we're really looking at individuals and then communities through a lens sort of like that. And I don't think it's a secret to say that times like this have been quite a mixed bag. And we're seeing, increases of anxiety, increases of depression, increases of a sense of isolation, and so on. And so it's been a challenging time for not only physical health, but also mental well-being.
And so, and the question is really, what it does to us, right? So like, in terms of who we are, we're talking about mindfulness, right? A lot in this context. We're talking about, being present, being here at the moment of change. So an element of managing the moment, but there's even a deeper element of managing who we are. So can you talk a little bit about how you see the impact on not only like the shock, but also the change in the way we communicate with each other? Because I really think like what we're doing right now is actually, I don't think that this would have happened and accelerated in such a rate if it didn't happen. So it changes. You know, Churchill used to say, we first design our buildings and then we first shape our buildings and then they shape us, right? I think we're shaping our technology right now. So how does it shape us, good and bad?
Yeah. You know, you make a really important point, which is almost immediately we've been thrown from highly immersive, information-rich environments that are embodied and relational to, relatively speaking, very impoverished information environments. And there's a term, right, that's become more popular, Zoom fatigue, and the neurobases of these are being studied right now. You know, is it that we're having to cue just on facial expression so much that is causing us sort of taxing on working memory or fatigue of a certain sort, or is it these other elements? But what we certainly are seeing, right, is that there's fatigue, that there is disruption when you go from embodied and relational ways of connecting into these virtualized ways. And I think there's some fundamental reasons for that. One is a technological reason. We just don't have the technology sophistication yet to create critical mass of an information-rich and immersive environments. And we might say, yeah, well, VR and well, AR, and that's true. So we'll get, and bandwidth of, you know, latency decreasing, and all of that's true. Those are kind of the technical aspects. But then there are the sort of fundamental design aspects, right? And what you said, you quoted Churchill, and one of my good friends, Mikey Siegel, often says, we are what we build and we build what we are in the technology world. And so there's a need for radically human technology, right? In fact, one of the courses we teach in our curriculum is on exactly this, radically human technology. And the challenge is that with certain objectives in mind, we design for efficiency, not necessarily effectiveness. And that's not a bad thing, but I want to draw out a slight contrast. Efficiency means I'm able to process X number of widgets, whether those widgets be physical products in the world or interactions or information exchanges per unit of time. And I want to maximize that. And so it's certainly an aspect to a degree of effectiveness, but effectiveness is more holistic in looking at how do you go about fulfilling an objective, whether that objective be meeting with a doctor one-on-one to get a consultation, or whether it be using sensor tech to feed back to you behavioral nudges so you do things that enhance your well-being, right? And so that difference, efficiency versus effectiveness, is one aspect, I think, that helps us reframe for a more humane technology. The second key, and this, I'm right, this is a big step back. It's quite a contrast conversation, I'm assuming, for folks, but I think there's a really important point here. Most of these sort of mediums that we're on, like this one right now, is built upon an assumption that we're essentially a brain on a stick, right? And that we process information in a relatively static way. I would like to explode that and say, look, as we design for and build technological capacity for virtualized medicine and telehealth and so on, what if we took seriously a more interesting paradigm of cognition, the so-called 4E approach, where it sees cognition as embodied, embedded, extended, and inactive. In other words, it's embodied in this brain-body system, right? In all of it, not just the brain on the stick, but the full system. Yes, there's different neurodensities in our brain for sure, but in this whole system, it's embodied, it's embedded in social, physical, cultural systems that actually bear on our cognition. It's extended, and that we can have our cognition scaffolded by extenders, whether those extenders look like this, or whether those extenders look like a book or a piece of paper or different artifacts or tools. And it's inactive in that it's beyond though neural network approaches and neurocorrelates of cognition are important, it's beyond that paradigm. And it says that actually the full lived experience of meaning and relevance is something that we enact upon the world as well as have the world enact on us. Now, that's a big philosophical statement. But what does that mean? It means it actually forces us to choose from a technological and design perspective how we build the systems to interact. The choices and trade-offs we make to have the type of information-rich experience that we need to activate our mirror neurons, to build empathy and connection and so on. And so I would uphold that side is just as important to kind of health outcomes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what does it mean to each and every one of us? When we take this thing, I mean, it's like, thinking deeper than just kind of like the day-to-day kind of do, the measure. All these things are very important, but like we went 3 levels deeper in that. When we need to think about it, everybody in the audience is taking, and we have hundreds of people watching. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. What can we take with us from our ability to really manage ourselves holistically, manage how not only our brain on the stick things, but how, our entire being things, to make sure that when we come in and out of this situation, we're actually better off, given the fact that we change interfaces, given the fact that, some of the necessities in life and where we are for the next at least few months, and many people say way beyond that, will change in a pretty significant way.
Yeah. And so I guess I would have 2 perspectives on that, which is, one, if I were speaking to the audience of designers and makers, right, and builders and entrepreneurs, I would say these are kind of design imperatives or design parameters. So you've got to design for the whole of cognition and the whole of the human, and for these 5 domains if you really want well-being, right? This psychological, this emotional, this social, this contemplative, this physical. If I'm speaking to those of us just, as human beings in the midst of this experience as users, I would say the number one thing is to remember the whole of the human, right? That we have these 5 domains, and then we have them embedded relationally, and which is one unit. So the individual, the self, the relationship, and then the communal, which is different. I belong to something bigger. And the challenge and the paradox of this is that we get drawn into an interaction. Like if I were sitting at a cafe with you, Ron, I would have this much eye contact. In fact, some people posit that's why some of this is so fatiguing, because it's like this amount of intimacy is hard to sustain. And so we get drawn into interactions that are different in flavor and valence than we're used to, that disrupt normal rhythms that we are hardwired and soft-wired to engage in, the self, the relational, and the communal. And so I would say, don't forget these 5 domains as they're unfolded on each of those levels.
That's profound, Aneel. I just want to say that's been delightful. I think that it will leave all of us with a really, a more holistic approach to understanding these new interactions that we're having, or types of interactions, or channels of interactions. The inner, the connectivity, the communal, right? Like I think of the experience here at FestiHealth is trying to make one step further towards what you're describing. I mean, it's not all the way there. I mean, there's a lot more to design and build for that. But the attempt to actually create these experiences that are more holistic and enable some of these things that they're never going to replace them. I mean, there's no substitute to meeting somebody in a cafe. But basically enabling that, and we're actually beyond time. But it's okay. I want to leave you with the departing thought.
It's a wonderful
for people who are
quote that I thought sort of typifies an aspect of this, right? And this is a little anecdote when Vonnegut tells his wife he's going out to buy an envelope. He's the great writer who's passed on. Oh, she says, well, you're not a poor man, Why don't you go online and buy 100 envelopes and put them in the closet? And so I pretend not to hear her. And I go out to get an envelope because I'm going to have a hell of a good time in the process of buying one envelope. I meet a lot of people. I see some great looking babes, and a fire engine goes by, and I give them the thumbs up, and I ask a woman what kind of dog that is, and I don't know. The moral of the story is we're here on Earth to fart around. And of course, the computers will tell us, will do us out of that. And what the computer people don't realize, or they don't care, is we're dancing animals. You know, we love to move around, and we're not supposed to dance at all anymore. So I would say, we technologists, as we build our systems for health and well-being, let's not forget that we are dancing animals, and that it's not all about efficiency, that part of the effectiveness is designing for the dancing animal.